Say what? Oh, this is Brian. Call me the Pain Without Quarter Gardener, coming to you from the Devil's Hole, aka not the Subterranean Studios. I am in the Galley Studios of the new Ramble on Towers in scenic Hesper, Ontario. You are listening to Ramble on Radio, episode number 148. Ramble on Radio is the original Led Zeppelin podcast, and this or any other known internets. Maybe the only one, depends on how you consider Carol Miller's Get the Lead Out for as a podcast. I kind of don't, I think it's more a radio show that they podcast as well, but I've been informed by Steve that I'm not allowed to say, by Steve Sauer, that I'm not allowed to say the only Led Zeppelin podcast anymore. But I am the original, the oldest Led Zeppelin podcast. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Led Zeppelin news, reviews, and any links I might mention during the show. You can subscribe to Ramble on Radio through iTunes and Google Play. And if you're in iTunes or Google Play, leave a review for the podcast. It helps their algorithms find it. It helps other people find it. It's also available on Podbean app at I Am Brian. Damn it, Podbean has their own mobile streaming app. So you can listen to it on the go without downloading in advance. You can listen on Stitcher Radio. And don't forget to check out Ramble on Radio on YouTube, where the last podcast made it to, and this one is also going to make it to, as it looks like. Also, follow Ramble on Radio on Facebook and at Ramble on Blog on Twitter. If you're on YouTube, you can see I'm in a different spot, and I have this beautiful picture behind me, my Led Zeppelin 440 from the Flood Gallery exhibit when the 40th anniversary of Led Zeppelin 4, about, what would that be, 8 years ago. And so we're in the kitchen, so you should know, no, I don't have a Led Zeppelin poster in the kitchen. The wife's not here, and I swapped it out for the podcast. But the thing is, for the camera, it looks nice and straight. You should see how crooked it is. And I had to do that. I put it straight, and you put up the camera, and you guys would have been emailing saying, straighten the picture, for God's sakes. And it was, so it's a funny thing. I went upstairs before I started the podcast, and I came down, and oh my God, look at that picture. But it looks good in the camera, and that's what this is about. Okay, the intro music was, what was it? It was from Earl's Court. How's that? It was from May 18th at Earl's Court. Let's see if I can dig this up real quick. Yeah, Sick Again. Sorry, I just drew a complete blank on what song I had done. Sick Again from Earl's Court on May 18th. Earl's Court happened, of course, 1975 on this, for instance, this is May the 16th. So the Earl's Court shows happen starting tomorrow, the 17th, 18th, 19th, and then 24th and 25th. 5 shows, kind of considered by many the peak of Led Zeppelin as performing bands. Physical Graffiti was out. The 75 tour had gone iffy in the States, mostly due to health reasons. But they were arrested, refreshed, and all on fire in Earl's Court. And probably were never as good again. Lots of people think 72, even 73, maybe even as early as 72 was really the peak before Robert Plant's voice started having issues. But I think for a lot of us, that kind of Earl's Court is the tip of it's the peak. And a lot because they were still a great band at that time. They were on fire. They sounded good, and they had the Physical Graffiti repertoire as well as everything up to that. Whereas kind of you get 72 and you're into 4 albums. Just you don't have Houses of the Holy. 73 you have Houses of the Holy. But by 75, you also had Kashmir, Sick Again, The Rover was being played. So there's a lot of, that possibly their finest shows. And certainly, if you, visually, when you look at Led Zeppelin pictures, and I think we talked about this on the anniversary of Earl's Court a couple of years ago. If you look at pictures of Led Zeppelin, there's a really good chance they're from Earl's Court. there's just so much visual evidence of that show, and those pictures have become completely iconic. It's, yeah, hold on one second here. Okay, also, so we're starting with the in history. Let's go in history. The 17th of May, tomorrow again, John Paul Jones appeared on Jules Holland with C60. That's in 2011. Oh boy, it doesn't seem that long ago, does it? And they performed Back in the Doghouse, if you recall. On the 18th in 1977, the second leg of the ill-fated U.S. tour started, went through to July. I think the July leg was actually third leg, wasn't it? And then on the 20th in 1985, Shaken and Stirred, the Robert Plant album, would have been his third, was released. Fourth was Now and Then, I think, right? Shaken, maybe it was the fourth. Maybe I'm missing one in there. All right. I want to get on. I got a lot of stuff today because I got prepared. Not like last week. And what I decided was I missed such a big block of period of time that I was going to kind of backtrack just because of the 50th anniversary and so much happened that you would qualify as anniversary wise. You know, like a lot of people, I tend to do the celebrations on the 5s and the 0s. Excuse me, I'm coughing and sniffing all of a sudden. So I decided to go back and miss what we've missed from January in. But there's been some stories, more modern stories as well, that I kind of touched on one or two of them last week, but I had no details. I was just, like I said, last week I was just flying with it. Thanks, by the way. Lots of people commented, how much they actually enjoyed last week. Considering I was off the cuffing it, I was a bit surprised by that and appreciative. Almost everybody also said, hope you're well, something to that effect. So I wanted to address that. I am well. I was not missing for 6 months because there was anything wrong. If anything, it was the opposite. Things were just going really good, and I got into a kind of comfortable place and just stopped doing this, just because I put my feet up. Yeah, it's funny. I retired last year, and you kind of think, oh boy, I'll have time to do 2 a week. Matter of fact, my daughter had said, you should do a podcast about just music, 70s, 80s music, stories of other bands, and Led Zeppelin. 2-3 years ago she said this. And I always thought, maybe when I retire, maybe I'll do that. There's not a chance. I don't have the time. But beyond that, you kind of get into a mode where you relax a bit, where you let up a little bit. Funny, I said to my wife last week, or I said to a friend last week, and then repeated it to my wife. I'm so busy. How did I do all this when I was working? I must have not slept. And my wife said, that's correct. You didn't sleep. So kind of when you retire, your body says, okay, we're going to sleep down. We're going to relax a little. And that, if anything, that is what happened. Other than just, I got out of the habit as much as anything, I actually think. But no, nothing is wrong. Nothing was wrong. Life is good. Everything is, there's days, but I have a 21-year-old son. It's never perfect with a 21-year-old around. They have drama. But nothing, nothing for you to worry about. Let's put it that way. Everything's good. So I wanted to address that. Thank you all for your concern. But it's everything's good. If you're watching this on YouTube, you're seeing my computer. I'm trying to find the right spot for my computer. All right. So here's some stories that we missed in the last little while. Let's start with, and in random order. It's kind of in the order I thought of them. The Metropolitan Museum of Arts Play It Loud, Instruments of Rock and Roll exhibition. Opened on April 8th. This is, and I'm going to make it down to New York. So I told my wife there's a trip to New York this summer. It's going until September, and it's like a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame kind of exhibit. It's got instruments of all sorts of people. It's got Keith Emerson's synthesizer. It's got a Beatles drum kit. There's some Pete Townsend stuff. So they've put together a huge, massive collection, including a very strong Jimmy Page collection. Jimmy Page was actually featured in a video playing Stairway to Heaven with his double neck guitar for the exhibit, a promotional video that they put out. But also features a number of his instruments, including his number one Les Paul, or what the guitar geeks call his number one, the one you're used to seeing, Sunburst 50s, the one he got from Joe Walsh, I believe. Is considered there's two kind of those guitars, the Sunburst guitars. There's a 1 and a 2. And then if you pay attention to the pictures, there's also one with a red tinge. But he had 1 and 2, and then he also had one called the Black Beauty, which was stolen in 1970, 69 or 70, in either Seattle or Vancouver. I'm never quite sure. And it was actually returned to him a couple of years ago. And it has the Black Beauty. It has his number one. It has the double neck. They have one of his acoustics. They have a dragon suit. Matter of fact, the double neck is like a mannequin of Jimmy Page in the dragon suit playing, holding it back, Jimmy style. So it's, if you're in New York this summer, that should be a visit for you, just to see Jimmy's guitars. And my understanding is there's a lot of stuff in this exhibit. It's a big exhibit. It'll take you a few hours to get through. And one or two people I know who've been phenomenal, just phenomenal, is what they are saying. So that's on my list to do this summer, and I will definitely report back when I go. But if you're in New York, if you're close to New York, or if you're going to New York, or if you're thinking of going to New York, there's one you should do. Okay, this comes directly from, I should say, I kind of jumped into LedZeppelinNews.com, and James is one of the people who emailed me, by the way, from LedZeppelinNews.com. But this one comes direct. This is a direct lift. Everything else I kind of went back to remember the story, but this was more of a direct lift from his site. So from LedZeppelinNews.com, Jimmy Page will release a signed limited edition book this year. Jimmy Page, the anthology, will be released through Genesis Publications. No further details on the book or release date have been provided. So it's a second Jimmy Page book. The first one, if you remember, Jimmy Page by Jimmy Page, came out on Genesis. It was several $1,000s. I think there was a signed limited edition, and there was a regular edition. And but they were extremely high. I think it was $1,500 or $4,000 or something. Outrageously high money for a book, which is what Genesis does, by the way. They sell really high level books. 2 or 3 years later, it came out in a really nice edition, actually. Very good, very well done, very high quality paper for only $40, which is actually a pretty good deal. For the size and quality of the book. $40 was good paper. It was photographic paper. It was a thick hardcover. It was a good size. And that stuff costs money. That is material. The material costs money. So $40 was not an outrageous price for Jimmy Page by Jimmy Page when it finally came out. So now the new one, the anthology, no idea what it's going to be in it, presumably more pictures and stuff, because it's kind of what Genesis specializes in anyway, is picture books. I make it sound like they're children's books. They're not. They're high-end. It's very odd. They do a lot of British artists, British musicians of the era specifically, and but they're always high quality. Quite often there's a high number of pictures. So. Yeah, there was a couple of Robert Plant stories. Now, I have not written this down. John Paul Jones did a couple of dates. Did a date last week or 2 weeks ago with one of those avant-garde bands. This was the second, and there was something else in this early spring He did a jazz band, or something, but I forget. But I don't have those details. But know that John Paul Jones has been seen. Now, for Robert Plant, we have a Record Store Day release. I pointed out last year that for Record Store Day, I picked up the Sonny Boy Williamson, and it had Jimmy featured. After I kind of had it in my hand, so I'm going to buy this. I noticed it had Jimmy Page's name on the cover. And there was a book called, an album, the Session Years or something like that it was called, or the Early Sessions, Jimmy Page Early Sessions. And it had a picture of him from Led Zeppelin. I think I have a copy, maybe. And that is the Sonny Boy Williams sessions, and those, of course, reappeared as this new album. So it's an album that's been around a while, and it's just kind of got a retouch, I guess. But Robert Plant also released an album on Record Store Day. It was Fate of Nations. It was a vinyl release, limited to 6,000 copies worldwide, featured updated artwork. I have not seen it. Nobody around here seemed to have one, or at least certainly didn't have one by the time I got to the store. And I was digging through the Steve Hoffman forum last night, looking to see what people had to say about it. Nobody kind of had anything to say. I couldn't find anything anyway about the quality of it, whether it's, and these guys are audiophiles who really care, who really get weird about their quality. But, and I say that in a good way, I suppose. But, I mean, there are guys who, 1 in 3 albums they buy aren't good enough and they send back. That sort of thing. I kind of think, like, where are you buying records? But they're so fussy that, there's a weird noise in there, I'm not buying it. Or the one I always found out was out of center. The hole it wasn't centered properly. The hole wasn't centered properly. I don't think I have a single album. And I guess I probably do. I'm just unaware of it. I'm trying to turn there we go. How's that, guys, on YouTube? Got some sun coming in from my left, which is making the picture on YouTube a little. But the reason I'm in this kitchen is I'm beside a big window and it's a beautiful sunny day. Okay, and then I mentioned last week that Robert Plant had a new band he had been out about with, and I had no details whatsoever, other than they did some shows. The new band was called Saving Grace. It had Susie Dean on vocals, Tony Kelsey on guitar and mandolin, Matt Worley on banjo and guitar, and percussionist Ole Jefferson. They did a surprise show, and then they did 3 or 4 shows opening up for a Fairport convention at the end of January. And that has been all we've heard from Saving Grace. He's back out on the road in the very near future with Sensational Space Shifter. So it may have just been a throw together. And let's have some fun. Like I said last week, it was very similar to a Band of Joy style band, Americana. Like I say, mandolin and banjo. 2 guitars, but mandolin and banjo. A female singer. So you kind of get a gist of the sort of thing they were doing. I don't have a set list. I was looking for it last night. I did not find it. So I can't authoritatively say what they were and were not playing. Apologies for that, but that's the band, and it seems like it's maybe it's he did one in Texas a little while back. Everybody thought, maybe this is Gran Torino, right? And everybody kind of thought maybe it's something new, and then he went back to say, so every once in a while he throws something together for 1 or 3 gigs, and I guess that's part of what he's doing these days. Get that Band of Joy feeling out of his bones and see where it goes. All right, so this is stuff I missed. From the last couple of months, from January 1st on. These are really it's stuff that happened in 69 or 2009. How's that grabbing? But it's the stuff that's kind of 50, 45, 35 years, that sort of thing. And there's a lot coming up through the year, right? There's Nebworth, there's In Through the Outdoor, there's the Honey Drippers, there's 84. Of course, Led Zeppelin 2 is coming. So there's more coming. I'm going to open something here, by the way. So I can. Zeppelin. Well, I shouldn't be doing this, should I? Episode 63, I think we're going to find. Episode 63. I talk about Led Zeppelin 1. So I'm bringing that up. That was when the rematch was done. It was episode 63. It was in June of... and do you know what? It's below the upload line. June 2004. I have an upload line on my computer that's designed to tell me when where everything that's loaded up. So I'm going to try and remember. I will upload episode 63 as well for you in the next couple of days. The problem with that is if you subscribe, you will get it like a new podcast, like a new episode. And I just want to kind of get the files. If I could just load the files in, they would all be up by now. God, I hope I still have it. I had a major computer crash. If I can do it, I'll do it. I think I do. I think I backed up to that stage. But, and at that point, I talked a lot about Led Zeppelin 1 and the quality of it and the surprise of it. And I talked about starting with good times, bad times. And how it's a song in the key of E, but it's a song in the key of A, but they started off in E, which is the fifth, which is kind of, that's a power chord, and the A and E is a power chord. So when you're in the key, so it's a real kick. When it finally resolves into an A, it's a bit of a kick when you realize what's gone on. You know, it's E, D, E, D. And then it doesn't settle into the A until the chorus. So it's a very authoritative piece, and it's a hell of a way to start a recording career. And that was kind of the point, I think, of my articles. Oh, I just eliminated myself. So. So I wanted to mention that because it came out, it's of course been 50 years on June 17th of Led Zeppelin 1. And now normally we would have sat here and I would have gone over. But I'm not going to. And all I'm pointing out is I think that, what did I say, 68, episode 68, is I have talked extensively at that time about Led Zeppelin 1. And, but you know, it's quite a bang up release. For a first album, for an album that was thrown together. And probably the most remarkable thing is the band had been together a few months. John Bonham was this complete unknown who kind of stepped in with these two very big known guys, and yet is not shy about his playing, does not kind of pull out the brushes and sit back and find his place. You know, Chris Hadfield has if you've ever read Chris Hadfield, the Astronaut's book, he talks about in life, whatever you do in life, you're a plus or minus or a net zero. Are you contributing, are you taking away, or are you... And he talks about kind of his first mission into space, his goal was to be a net zero. Don't be a negative. That's, if you know, find your feeding. So it's not unusual, for instance, if you're in a new job, for the first couple of months, you're kind of a net zero. Don't cause trouble, don't be a negative. Don't be a net negative. Don't do a stupid mistake. But you're not jumping out in the lead on stuff. You're not being a positive yet. And then as time goes on, you become a positive, or you become a negative, and they get rid of you. But that's another story. And so that's, you know, you're kind of thinking a guy like John Bonham. Robert Plant was probably a bit of a more of a neutral figure, as much as a lead singer could be a neutral figure on that first album. He doesn't jump out at it and do it. He's not really the net positive till the second or third album, really, wouldn't you say? But John Bonham, right off the get-go, is very much a net positive, very much pushing this band forward, very much takes the reins, and it's an interesting dynamic that's created almost right off the bat from their first album. That's the most impressive thing about it to me is how cohesive, how, you know, Babe, I'm Gonna Leave You, and to Dazed and Confused, it's a really unique sounding album. It's got a lot of different stuff coming at you, and these guys have been together a month and a half, and they recorded it in 18 hours or something like that. So that's what I would have said if I was doing this in the end. That's the kind of podcast you would have got. So other stuff, though, that came up on the 2nd of January, there were 3 shows at the Whiskey A Go-Go. It was the first. And then on the 9th at the Fillmore West, so that's LA and San Francisco. And they kind of blew away all those shows. And then I'm going to jump a bit. The 31st of January, they did 2 nights at the Fillmore East in New York. The first night of which they blew Iron Butterfly off the stage. They were opening for Iron Butterfly. And it was, I read something just in the last few weeks, and I don't remember who the quote is from. I think Robert Plant. But it could be Jimmy Page, could even be John Paul Jones. But somewhere in the back of my brain, I think it's Robert Plant. And he says, it's amazing how fast it went early on. Looking back, it seemed just natural at the time, but looking back, it's amazing how fast things happen. That nobody knew who they were at the end of January. Or at the beginning of January, nobody knew who they were. They were this brand new band. And by the end of the month, they were opening for Iron Butterfly, and Iron Butterfly didn't want to go on. And that's the fact, Jack. That's what happened. The second night of those 2 shows, Iron Butterfly did not want to go on with Led Zeppelin. And that was one of those defining moments. But the Fillmore and the Whiskey were part of that. Building, you know, when the first album was released on the 17th, it already had quite a following. A lot of that had to do with those shows at the Whiskey and the Fillmore. As well as some radio stations who've been pre-playing, particularly one in Boston, I think, had been pre-playing some cuts from the album. So, and then on the 20th of January, the rumored Wheaton, Texas show was well, happened or didn't happen. There's a film called Led Zeppelin Played Here. I do have a story about the filmmaker who I contacted when it first came out and said, oh, you know, I'd like to see it. I'll talk about it on my podcast. And he basically gave me a snarly, I will check out your podcast and decide if you're worth it. You know what? Whatever. Never heard back from him and don't care. So I've never really promoted this movie since, because he didn't seem to want the promotion. And you know what? Occasionally I do follow the filmmaker on Facebook, and occasionally there's a premiere of it somewhere or showing of it, but it's very rarely actually. And yeah, I've not had anybody contact me saying they saw it. You know, I kind of at the time said, hey, well, if you want to go see it, let me know how it is, but I won't be going out of my way to see it. And nobody ever has, so I don't know how many people have actually seen it. But the film is called Led Zeppelin Played Here, and it is investigating whether, in fact, they ever played this show in Wheaton, Texas, on the 20th of January, 1969. Nobody seems to know. Nobody seems to know. It's not on official itinerary. Nobody can find tickets, but there is promotional material for the show. And I think members of Led Zeppelin have been asked over time, and like I said, I don't really remember. So it's a funny little story, and if you've seen the movie, let me know. I'm not anti the movie. If the movie came to my town, I would go see it. If it was on Netflix, I would watch it, and I wish you would get it on Netflix. But yeah, funny. He also did a movie called Heavy Metal Parking Lot. It was basically looking at heavy metal in the 80s, and he kind of, before a show, was talking to people in the parking lots of shows and stuff. Never seen it, but it's the one that seems to be the biggest movie in his profile, and he still talks about it quite regularly on his page. So, yeah, I don't know. He's not promoted this movie as much as you would hope, I think. But yeah, if you've seen it, let me know. I'd love to hear it. All right, getting into 2009, actually, in February, the 8th and 10th, well, the 8th, Robert Plant and Alison Krauss won 5 Grammys for Raising Sand, including Album of the Year. That was 10 years ago. That's last February. And on the 10th, It Might Get Loud, the movie featuring Jimmy Page, Jack White, and The Edge, and kind of getting together and playing guitar and talking about themselves as guitar players, premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival. I absolutely... I think I did. I know I wrote about it on the podcast or on the blog. I don't know if I was doing the podcast at that time, but I might have been. I don't think so. So I don't think I've ever actually talked about that movie, but quite a good movie. And then we move on to March. That was February. March, we're back to 1969. The first Top Gear session for BBC was recorded on April 3rd, 1969. On the 21st, they recorded Communication Breakdown for the TV show How Late It Is. Both that first session and the Communication Breakdown appear on the BBC sessions. That's part of the recorded oeuvre of the band. And then finally, on the 24th of January in 1969, they kicked off their second North American tour at the Winterland Ballroom. Winterland Ballroom was owned by the same guy who owned the Fillmores, East and West, Bill Graham. Their last show in the United States in 1977 was put on by Bill Graham. They had a relationship with Bill Graham right through to the end, although the last shows, there was an incident that soured that relationship permanently. But here they are, sort of. Now, the Winterland was a bigger room, my understanding, a much bigger room than the Fillmore. So you can see the second tour, first album's out, the first album's starting to sell, and the second tour is a bigger tour. And, of course, by the end of the year, they're kind of, well, not the end of the year, but the beginning of the next year, they've moved up to the, 14,000-seat hockey arena shows. By 1970, it's the Bath Festival. They're headlining the Bath Festival, and they're playing at probably Madison Square Garden. Certainly playing Maple Leaf Gardens in 1970. So it's 1969 is a real growth year for the band, and we'll talk a lot about that this year as the podcast goes along. All right, I have a blank from the collection, so I'm gonna improvise real fast on this. So if you're on YouTube, behind me is the picture, which I've already talked about. I should have waited to tell you the whole story about the being crooked and stuff. 4 at 40 from the Flood Gallery. They had a bunch of posters. If you remember, they had 8 posters representing each song on the 4th album. Plus, they had this, which was basically the promotional for the show. It was the one I liked best. It was, you could buy them. They were not that expensive. It was £25 or something. And at the time, The Canadian dollar was strong. For those who don't know, for those who are new, I'm in Canada, and the Canadian dollar was fairly strong at the time, and so it's against the British pound, which I think was a little weak at the time. That I was getting an exchange rate of about $1.50, so 25 pounds was $40, which is not outrageous. Nowadays, it's back up over 2, which kind of traditionally it's been. You know, if you look at the history of the Canadian versus British pound, you know, it's probably 2 and change, as high as 280 in my lifetime. I remember it. That's kind of the normal. So at 240, 250 at 25 pounds, this is now $60 plus shipping. And it's one of the reasons I haven't picked up a lot of Dave Lewis's newer material. It costs too much. When you throw shipping in and the exchange rate, it's no longer really a reasonable price here in Canada. And that's not to bag on Dave or to bag on any. That's just the way it is. They're selling it at 40 pounds. He's got a book out and he's selling it for 40 pounds, which is a reasonable price. That's the price of a couple of record albums. But for me, that's a $100 book. That's $100 and change book. Whereas a couple of years ago it was $60, which you can kind of go, okay, I'll swallow that and buy the book. But at $100, it becomes I think when I looked at the and this is a real tangent, isn't it? When I looked at the Earl Court book he did a couple of years back, it was going to cost me somewhere in the neighborhood of $140 to get it here, and so it just never happened. It didn't. So anyway, this is from the Flood Gallery. This is a poster, and if anybody wants it, it's for sale. I wasn't planning on doing that, but I actually moved and have a smaller house, and I don't have the room for it. So if you actually want it, contact me. It's not for sale particularly, but I would be prepared to part with it if somebody really wanted it. That's it. Let's leave it on that note. I don't know if that's an up note or down note or sour note or that capitalistic note. That's it for Ramble on Radio, episode 148. Check rambleonradio.com for notes on this week's podcast, Led Zeppelin news, reviews, and any links I might mention in today's podcast. You can follow Ramble on Radio on Facebook and at Ramble on Blog on Twitter. You can subscribe to Ramble on Radio through iTunes and Google Play. If you're in iTunes, if you're in Google Play, leave a review for Ramble on Radio. It helps. The more reviews, the more their algorithms find the podcast when they do a search. It gives you credit. Doesn't matter if it's a good review, doesn't matter if it's a bad review. I don't really look at them. I have done so once or twice, bored one night, and was very pleasantly surprised by the reviews, but you're kind of not doing it for me. It's not for my support, or I don't know the right word I'm looking for, but you're not pumping me up. If you're in Britain and the States, matter of fact, it's a big issue. Me trying to see, because iTunes separates you by country. I'm in Canada, and then you go. So when I look at reviews, I will only get the Canadian reviews, and I have to tell iTunes I'm in America, which it accepts with no problem. And then I see the American reviews, and so if you're in Spain, I wouldn't see it anyway. I wish there was a way to see them all like that. They should really make that possible for us guys, but it doesn't work that way. So I really won't see it. It's Apple, iTunes will see it, or Google Play will see it, and they will. It helps other people. Basically, when their algorithms have an easier time finding the podcast, it rates it higher. That's what it does. So it'll help other people find the podcast. When other people search for Led Zeppelin in iTunes, podcast. You can listen on Stitcher Radio. Stitcher has their own app. You can stream it then in your car or whatever. You can download it from I Am Brian at Damn It on Podbean, and Podbean also has their own app, and you can stream or download directly from that. And you can check Ramble on Radio on YouTube, which this will be on. This is going to be on it. And that's it for Ramble on Radio. We're going to close out with the latter half of Sick Again from May 18th, 1975, Earl's Court.